Today on The Rational Rancher, we are going to be answering the age-old question, what makes more money, cows or sheep? When I first started ranching, it's been about 14 years ago now, we tried everything. We tried goats, we're trying sheep now, we had cows, feeders, calves, and what it all boils down to is you're trying to make a living, you're trying to make money off the land, so what is your best option? And today we're going to go over our real life ranch numbers. This is what we made last year on our sheep and on our cows. So before we get started with all that, we got to go over kind of the scenario we're running here. We have 100 ewes on our ranch currently. That's what we had last year. Those are the lambs we sold. We're off those 100 ewes. And we have 30 head of cattle. But that's not really a good comparison. So what we're going to do is the 100 ewes versus 14 cows. And how I came up with why 14 cows is because the industry standard is kind of 7 sheep for every cow you have on your pasture. You can argue with that, but that's kind of what all the old timers say, so that's what we're going with. So we're going to be comparing the profits, expenses of 100 ewes to 14 cows. And we raise registered stock, but we sold just commercially some steers, and those are the numbers we're going to go with because it wouldn't be fair to pick and choose. We're just going to go with commercial. That's what we sell our sheep for, and commercial prices for our cows. So here we go. Here comes the numbers. So let's start off with the expenses for our cows. We're going with 14 cows. On average, last year, we spent about $50 on minerals and salt for those cows. We buy a mineral blend from our local feed store, and on average, we're spending 50 bucks a head. Hay, this can vary so dramatically across the board. But last year, what we spent on hay for our cows, we had a drought. We were spending $360 a head to feed our cows through the winter. And then I throw in a miscellaneous $25 a head. And this is basically ear tags, if we had to medicate a cow throughout the year, just random things that we had to spend on. So that comes out to $435 expense for our per 14 cows we had, for a grand total of $6,090. Now that is the expenses for our cows. But wait, there's more. The calves have some expenses of their own. So those 14 cows had 14 calves, and those calves, we kept track. They ate about $10 in minerals before we got them sold. Their hay expense was $60 for each one of those calves, and then we tacked on a $10 miscellaneous fee for those calves. So that comes out to $80 in additional expense per calf. That's $1,120 for the 14. So that brings our grand total for the calves, because you have to have the cows to get the calves, of expenses for last year for those 14 is $7,210 in total expense. And now on to the sheep. As you can see behind me, these are our 100 ewes that we have, and we made a video previously on how much money we made off these 100 ewes. So if you want more detail, watch that video. But here's the gist. For these 100 ewes, we average $28.20 in expenses. Hay, minerals, wormer, antibiotics, ear tags. That's our expense, $28.20. Now that we got all the expenses down, let's look at some profit. We sold those 14 calves in December, and we averaged $1,950 a head. You might ask, well, how much did they weigh? That's a great question. It varied. The average for our group was around upper 400-pound range. The market is red hot right now for calves. That is the most we've ever got for just commercial weaned steers, and we were extremely happy with it. So the grand total was $27,300 that we got for those 14 calves. Amazing. But they had those expenses we talked about early. So minus $7,210, our net profit for 14 calves on a grass-based farm is $20,090. Good profit, nice solid profit. We were happy with it. And so let's see how that compares with the sheep. And the income we had off of them when we sold their 120 lambs was $21,950. So if you subtract the expenses from the income, you're left with a net of $19,130. Before we discuss any further, you might say, how are your expenses so low for your sheep and cows? We are a grass-based operation, meaning we don't supplement with any type of grain or other things like that. So we can keep our expenses low. It requires rotational grazing and a little more management time, but we have less expenses. So there's the numbers. The sheep made $19,130 and the cows made $20,090. The cows are officially the winner. Not by much, but about $1,000. So if you have the option of running 100 sheep or 14 cows, in 2025, the cows made more money for us here in the Ozarks. Now remember, these are all real numbers from a grass-based operation. There are so many other things you can consider as far as handling facilities you need for sheep are so much less than what you need for cows. Transporting a sheep, you can stick them in the back of a truck. A cow, you're gonna have to have a trailer. You know, did you have to take a loan out to buy your sheep or your cows? Is your farm paid for? Like, we could go on and on. I just wanted to give you guys good, solid, real life numbers for what you could expect to make if you have the capability to run either 100 sheep or 14 cows. The other last consideration I want to mention is that 14 cows in today's market are considerably more expensive than 100 sheep. You can find some nice Katahdin hair ewes for around $300 a head. So you're looking at a $30,000 investment. For cows, I mean, right now it's crazy. You could spend $4,000 or $5,000 for a bred heifer. And so your initial investment is going to be a lot more for the cows. Those are just all things to consider. Please comment below if you think I'm a horrible rancher and should have done a lot better. Let me know. Let me know what your numbers are doing. If you raise hair sheep or any kind of sheep or cattle, please in the comments section, let's get a discussion going on how you guys are doing this past year with your numbers. So for what it's worth, this rancher here in the Ozarks, those are my numbers for how I did with 100 sheep and 14 cows. Thank you for watching.